Hey, I'm Brad with Go Code Overland, and today I'm going to be showing you how to install the keder track on our Bugwall system. We're going to start out with the slider first. The kit should come with a 40-inch long straight piece of keder track, and it's going to seat right up against the flange of the slider right here, and it's going to start right at the radius of this curve, the very start of that radius. We're going to be using an 1/8 inch drill bit. We're going to go through the keder track and through the slider. And you want to get rid of all that debris that was in there from the hole. Flip the piece over, and we're going to be using rivets and a rivet gun. These rivets are 1/8 by 3/8. So finding that hole that we've drilled, you want to make sure, if you are using an upholstered piece, that at the riv hole site you are clear of fabric. So you might have to peel your fabric back just a little bit and find that hole. You don't want the rivet sitting on top of excess fabric. I'll load the rivet to the gun. Find our hole, push it all the way through. This is when we flip over and install the track on the rivet. Give it a good push, make sure it's seated. And I usually do 2 pumps on these. One about halfway. And when you release, you pick up extra slack on the shank. Push it all the way down until it clicks and your rivet comes out. And once again, starting right at that radius and going all the way down, seated up against this flange. I'm going to go ahead and get this registered correctly all the way down and do the other end. Go about 1 inch, 1.5 inches away from the edge. Drill a hole through the keder track and the slider. And we'll get rid of that debris in there. And once again, we're going to flip the piece over. Make sure that we are clear of fabric where our hole is. Peel that back. Push the rivet in. Make sure it's down all the way. Half the pump. Reset. One more. Oh, now that we've got one hole registered here and one hole registered here, I'm going to go ahead and put a couple more rivets in there. Once again, the ones on the edge, put them about 1 inch or 1.5 inches away from the end of the keder track. And because the ends of these get used the most, sliding the wall screen in and out, I like to put 2 on the ends. So got one here, and about 1.5 inches away, another one. Same thing on this side right here. I like doubling up those rivets on the end, giving them a little extra strength. First one about 1.5 inches from the edge of this radius, and then another one about 1.5 inches further down. Also put one about 1/3 of the way through, middle of the way through, and one more 1/3 of the way through here. So it makes for a total of 7 rivets. You do want to make sure that you are seated all the way up against the slider, and that it is all the way up against the edge of the flange here. Okay, we'll move on to the center D pillar next. All right, we're going to move on to the center D piece. Now, if you do notice, the keder track for the center D pillar does have some curves in it, and we want these curves to match up to the contour of the piece and get that seated nice and tight. Another way that helps with the registration of the keder track here is by putting a registration point on your keder track, and that's simply just measuring the whole piece, divide it in half, put a little mark right there. That registration point should line up directly in between the two holes for the door latch. So you can kind of set it on there, wiggle it around and feel it, make sure that's seating properly up against that topography, and also check to make sure this registration point falls right in between here. Same process as last time. We're using an 1/8 inch drill bit, and we're gonna put 2 on each end. But before we do that on this one, I like to make sure that we're registered in the middle. The other registration point you want to be cautious about are these divots for the buttons or your screw holes here. You want to ride the edge of that with the keder track so it seats right up against it. Notice that I'm on the far side of the hole that goes back towards the door and away from the flange here. So I'm going to put a hole right in the middle once I have that registered properly. 1/8 inch drill bit. I'm going to blow out our debris. We'll load the rivet gun. Flip this over. Install the rivet into the hole. Make sure you get it in there all the way nice and firm. Flip over again and install the keder track on the rivet. We're pushing down firmly, make sure it's seated all the way. Half a pump, push down again, and a final one to cut it. I'll do the rest of these and show you where I put them. All right, so after getting the middle registered and riveted down, you want to do the same thing on the slider. About 1.5 inches in from the end, I'm going to put a rivet, and I like lining those up directly with the recess right here for your installation screw. So notice I have one here, one right by the hole, and then coming down the piece, another one right lined up with this hole. And notice how the keder track is seated right on the dimple of this hole here. Right on the edge of that radius is where we want that to sit. Moving down the piece after the contour, we have another one here. And of course our one that is in the middle, a rivet before the contour, and another rivet after the contour lined up with this hole. Once again on the end, one lined up with the hole, and another one close to the edge. About 1.5 inches away should do you. So with 9 rivets, we're firmly installed on the piece. I do want to thank you all for shopping with Go Code Overland. If you do have any questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out to us. We also hope that you enjoy your system and hope it's been a riveting experience. Thanks.